My name is Mackenzie Overholser, and welcome to Lifeline Podcast, where I relate everyday circumstances with an everyday loving God. Well, today's podcast is going to be a little bit different rather than what we have been doing lately, where I tell a story and then I relate it back to that story. That's mainly what the podcast is about, don't get me wrong. But today, I've posted on my Facebook page about how I was going to tell a different story. It's going to be more so of a personal story. It's going to be about how I actually got into doing this podcast and how I kind of figured out what God's calling for me was and how I took it and I went with it and all kinds of stuff. It's not as glamorous of a story as probably what some people are thinking, because honestly, in all essence, I don't think I've ever told anybody this full story before. I haven't told them all the details about where I've gotten. They've only seen what I've allowed them to see. I haven't told them everything. And I don't know if everything will come out in this podcast, but a good chunk of it will. But it's a long story. I think it is, because it started about 6 years ago. 6 years ago is when I think I told my first story in church, and that's where it all started, was that first story. About 6 years ago, I would have been 19 when I started doing this, or felt a tug from God to do it. And I think, I can't even tell you what the very first story was, and I'm gonna have to, before I get into all of that, I'm gonna have to give you it's not really like a disclaimer, it's gonna be more so of a, I apologize if I feel like I get a little bit emotional while telling you these stories, because it's very personal and it hits home pretty close. And I've never retold these stories before of what I've went through and what I've had to do and what I've had to make choices with. So please bear with me, and hopefully somebody, even if it's just one person, gets something out of this, where I talk about gifts, talents, and callings, and trying to decipher what you need to do or where you think God's leading you. I hope that you get something out of this. Anybody can get anything out of this story or out of this podcast today. It's really meant for everybody. So go ahead and give this a listen and take something out of it, okay? So imagine 6 years ago, I was 19. I was in college at that point in time. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. It still is kind of touch and go, because, throughout your whole life, you can be like, I don't know what I do want to do with my life, but then you find odd end things that just give your soul so much joy and so much happiness. But 6 years ago, I was 19, and I remember being in college classes, trying different things, because people told me, take random classes, figure out what you want to do. And I was like, oh, okay, I could do that. So I took some random classes to figure out what I wanted to do. But one thing that I felt like God was talking to me was to take classes for the medical field. I was a little nervous about that because I didn't particularly like needles, so I wanted to do something in the medical field without needles, without doing whatever, and then somehow I ended up in these classes to become a certified medical assistant, and guess what they do? They deal with needles. So, going through those classes, in the clinical classes, I had to get over my fears. I had to get over my fears of needles. I had to get over my fears of talking to strangers. I had to get over my fears of public speaking. I had to get over many, many fears that I had to endure, and that I totally sidestepped in high school. Like, if I could completely move away from high school and not do a public speaking thing, or if I didn't have to speak in front of a crowd at all, anything like that, I would do it. I would do anything to get away from it. I would do anything to not do it, because that was way out of my comfort zone, out of my comfort level. I didn't want to do it, and I didn't feel calling from God at that time when I was in high school to do anything like that. Nothing. So after high school and junior high, I was pretty shy. I mean, I was a very shy person until you got to really know me, and then I felt like I could be myself around you without being judged or without being ridiculed or hurt. Then I would open up to you. I have to feel out the playing field a little bit before I could actually do anything and let my walls down. Well, fast forward after high school, I'm in college trying to figure this out, and then God's telling me to go in this medical field. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I need to pick something because it's getting to be like 2 or 3 years in, and I haven't picked anything. So I went into the medical assisting program, went into that, passed, and I graduated, and I took the test to become a certified medical assistant, and that's where I am today. But during that college career, one required class was a speech class. I remember very distinctly this speech class because I hated speech. I hated everything that dealt with public speaking. I didn't think I was good at it. I hated it. I didn't want to be in front of people. I just was not good at it. It was way out of my comfort zone. And I remember it was required within this course. And I'm like, great. Yay. Well, I mean, you have to learn how to publicly speak to strangers when you're in a medical field. You see strangers every day and you have to talk to them. So it was a very good required part of the course. It's just I didn't want to do it. So I remember being in the speech class, and I remember there only being 5 people, 6. I think 6 counting myself, if that's correct, I think. It was 6 people that were in the speech class, and I remember getting up in front of the classroom, and I remember that very first time I had to give a speech, I was nervous as all get out. I couldn't even look at the people. It was probably a horrible mess and a huge wreck. I remember coming back down off that speech stand and being like, oh my goodness, I can't do this. But we had to give a speech every week. Every week was a new speech that we had to give. So while I was going through that, obviously my first speech was not very good. I mean, I got some marks on it that I needed to improve this or that, and I mean, it was nothing but helpful marks for me to improve. So then the next week came. I improved a little bit, but not, not very good. And then, as it progressed throughout the entire semester, by the end of the semester, I wasn't completely comfortable, but I was still way better than I was at the beginning of that semester. They loved some of my speeches that I gave, and I remember going on and do some of my other medical classes. I had to take this one class where I had to do a topic over autism, and I remember giving a speech over autism, and my teacher 100% was thrilled and loved it. She said I loved how I carried myself and speaking that way, but really what she didn't know, I was dying on the inside. I was dying because it's all about putting up that persona of I'm not scared, but really, oh my goodness, I was terrified on the inside. But after all that happened, I got out of my speech classes. I got out of the other classes where I didn't have to do public speaking really much anymore, except for the random presentations. But as that went on, when I was in college, I was turning 20, I was getting older, and then getting to the point where I was going to graduate and stuff like that. And I think deep down, God was, even back then, when I was 19 or so, or even right at the end of high school, I think he was setting me up to mold me and shape me into who he wanted me to be. And even today, guys, I'm not there yet. He's still molding and shaping me. If you think this story ends with me being perfect, you're wrong. This is just the highlight reel of my imperfections as I am still trying to grow. So the story doesn't end with me becoming perfect or where I'm 100% sure where God wants me to be, because I'm not sure. So while I was sitting here going through all that, and my public speaking classes have ended at this point. So I wouldn't have to do any more public speaking if I didn't want to. It was off the table. I didn't have to do it. Until one day, I can't even tell you what my very first story was at church, but I remember one day God talking to me or pushing me, or I felt like this deep calling or deep feeling one Sunday to get up and speak in front of the church. I was a song leader anyway, so it wasn't like I was getting up out of my pew and just going up to the front to speak. I was already at the front. I mean, half the battle was already done there. But after they did testimonies, and they closed testimonies one time, I remember thinking, oh, God wanted me to speak. He wanted me to say something, but I didn't do it. I didn't do it because I didn't want to do it. It's not what I want. This public speaking isn't what I want to do at all. Not even a little bit. But then I kept sitting there on the pew up in the front. And after the announcements were done, after prayer was done, everything was done in the service. And it came up to the song service right before the sermon. And that's when I went up to go to the microphones to do the song service. Sometimes we announce birthdays before anniversaries. So before the birthdays and anniversaries, I sat there, and I just got this overwhelming feeling from God. All I could hear or feel was, speak. Speak, say something, do something. And I already knew what he wanted me to speak about. It was a story. So I told my testimony in the version of a story. And everyone loved it. I didn't think that they would, and I didn't think it was very significant, because it was just my version of a testimony, was turning it into a story. And the reason why my brain automatically went to tell a story was because when we were little, we would do sack sermons. And I will always remember these sack sermons. These sack sermons was, there's a sack or a bag, and a kid, it would rotate between the kids in the church, and a kid would get to pick an item, and they would put it in the sack, and then they would bring it up to the front of the church every Sunday, and the preacher had to relate God back to the item that was in the bag. And I remember that wholeheartedly, thinking, oh, we got the preacher this Sunday. He ain't gonna get nothing out of this. And then he would bring something out of it, and he would relate it back to God in some way. And I was just in awe with that as a kid. And then growing up more, and we were reading the Bible, and Jesus would tell analogies in the Bible, like stories that would relate back to the people, where they could understand it better by him telling different stories. And all of that, I think, combined into me doing this. All of that combined into me doing this, because I am a visual person. I love stories. I love hearing them because I can relate them to everyday life. And that is how I think that the Lifeline podcast, or even just me before the podcast, even just me telling these stories in my church, started. That's how it all started, was because of that. All that. So God was working, I think, when I was a kid, even with these sack sermons and growing up and like learning more about the Bible and how Jesus taught. And then I loved the way Jesus taught, and I got the most out of the way Jesus taught with these stories. And I think that's how he has instilled that in me to become this way. Well, after my first story in church, that was 6 years ago, I thought that was a one and done thing. I thought that was it. That was just the one time that God put it on my heart to say something like that, and I was done. That's it. But then, over time, like every Sunday after that, God would work throughout my week, and I would see something just awesome that he would be doing or working in ways that maybe others didn't realize. And then I would tell a story. And then it got to be, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 times, I don't know how many times, but then over time, members of my church family, they would be coming up to me after church going, oh, that was a good story, what do you think you're going to talk about next week? Or during the week, they would even ask me, hey, what you going to talk about this Sunday? I love your stories, they're so relatable, and stuff like that. And I just couldn't believe what I was hearing, because God was taking something that I didn't want to touch or deal with, or didn't want it as a gift or a talent, and he is just molding me and shaping me and throwing me into this this kind of abyss of his calling, and I didn't want any part of it. So after a while, I think it was like, I don't know how many years I did that, 2 or 3 or 4, probably right around there, probably 3 or 4 years I did it. And then here comes a little bit of a rift in the story part, I think. After a while of doing that, I was telling stories in church every Sunday. And then I remember distinctly, we had Sunday school where our preacher's wife, now our current preacher and his wife, she was teaching Sunday school. And I remember her challenging us to read more of the Bible, but she was trying to do it in a different kind of way, rather than just telling someone to read more of the Bible. I remember her giving us booklets that we got to write down our readings in. I remember thinking, oh, this might not help me read as much of the Bible, because sometimes, guys, I don't read the Bible as much as what I should. I'm not going to stand here and tell you I'm a perfect human, because I'm not. I don't read as much as what I should. I struggle with reading the Bible sometimes. And the preacher's wife, she knew that sometimes it's hard to read the Bible. And she encouraged us to read it, any time of the day. Any time of the day that we could fit it in. Morning, evening, anytime. And I remember getting this booklet. It's like a little journal. And it had, phrases on the front. And the guys got some, but they were different phrases, and the girls got some, they were different phrases as well. And we would bring it back every Sunday, and we'd talk about, what we found interesting in our readings that week. But I remember one time, I distinctly remember, I went to this house, to house sit for somebody. I remember doing that. And I took my Bible with me in this booklet, or this journal, because I knew I had to keep reading. And while I was doing that, I would come home after work, come to their house after work, and I would read the Bible, and I would look into it and see what there was to read that week, wherever God wanted me to be. And I remember, this is the part I have to say that kind of kills me a little bit. Because I remember reading. And after reading the Bible a couple nights that time, when I was staying at someone's house to house sit, I remember reading, and while I was reading, I don't know how else to express or how else to explain what it felt like, but it felt like you were completely filled with the Holy Spirit in a way. I felt like my soul was on fire for Him, and I didn't know what to do about it. And here's the thing: instead of talking to somebody about it, instead of going to somebody to try to figure it out, I ran. And I know some people are like, why would you run from something like that felt that good? Well, here's the scary thing, guys. And I'm becoming more opened up to it. I'm trying to learn from it. And it's a heartbreaking moment looking back. So excuse me if I become a little bit emotional. It's a very heartbreaking moment, because I knew what He wanted me to do, but instead of doing it, I just ran. I ran instead of knowing and doing what He wanted. I'm sorry, guys, I'm crying. Because the pains of the past can still be there. I've moved on and I'm far from it. But it's just, this is the first time that I'm opening up and telling anybody about this. And it's heartbreaking, because I know what He wanted. When I felt that and I ran, it was, I didn't run just for a few days, guys. I ran for a year and a half. A year and a half of running. I felt God setting my soul on fire, and the reason why I ran is because instantly I felt fear. I felt fear because I didn't feel like I was good enough. I felt fear because this is not what I wanted to do. I felt immense amounts of fear and felt like I was a failure before I even started. I didn't feel like I was worthy of anything that He was trying to give me, or anything that He was trying to tell me. I didn't feel it. I didn't want to feel it, because I didn't feel like I was worthy enough. Looking back, I know that's a lie. Looking back now, I can hear how dumb it sounds, but I know there are others out there that feel this exact way. Maybe at this moment, there are people that feel that way, that know what God wants them to do, but they're not doing it because of the fear. And I know instantly the moment that I felt that, and I felt his entire calling of what he wanted me to do, and like the fire that he set up in my soul. The only reason why I ran was because of the fear of not being able to do it enough to his liking, and the fear of not being able to accomplish what he wanted me to do. So, guys, that was the beginning of me running for a year and a half. Let me tell you, that year and a half was awful. Awful. Because immediately when I started running, I knew what I was doing. I knew I was running. And I knew I shouldn't run. But I didn't know how else to tackle it because I was afraid. I was afraid of the possibilities that he would allow me to do. I was afraid of the accountability if I went in this direction. I was afraid of having to go deeper in the spiritual walk because the power and the overwhelming amounts of just that fire burning in my soul was terrifying. And I know it sounds dumb, that it should have been comforting, but it was terrifying for me. Again, because I didn't feel like I was good enough, and the whole list of things I just mentioned. But that year and a half was awful with me running. Awful. Because as soon as I turned my back to run, as soon as I started running, I think it was from that moment on, the devil, or his little minion demon things, I don't know what it was, but oh my goodness, jumped on my back, because everything that I just told you, my fears, every little insecurity I had was amplified. Times 100. Amplified. He made me feel like that I wasn't capable of doing this. He made me doubt everything that I did. He made me question everything of who I was. He made me feel like I could never do this. And what gave me the right to think that I could do something like this out of my comfort zone? It's out of my comfort zone. I wouldn't want to do this. So he jumped on my back and he took every fear, every insecurity that I had about my personal walk, about my physical looks, about everything about me. And he chose to drive it into the ground. And he set out a mission to destroy me spiritually. He wanted to destroy me completely because I was beginning to do something that he didn't like, and that he knew that I would be using what I was going to do to glorify God in every way, and to branch out from this and to become something better than what I ever could imagine. He didn't want that, guys. The devil doesn't want you to use your gifts at all for any kind of glory that God has, because the devil knows the power that God has. So when I started running, it was an open door. It was an open door for him to just start beating me down, and for him to just start not letting up for a long time. And I can't tell you how dark of a place I was in for a long time. And I'm sorry, but it's emotional to think about going back into that time frame of my life when it hurt so much. And after a while, I mean, my pastor and his wife and some of my family and probably friends, they could notice that there was something wrong with me, because I was snapping more than usual. I was angry all the time. I was irritable. And they noticed that there was just something wrong with me. And I can't blame them, because there was something wrong with me. I was just trying to hide it for so long. And me hiding it just amplified it and made it worse. So, after a while of me trying to hide it, it just intensified all those horrible feelings and thoughts. And then it just manifested bigger and bigger and bigger until I couldn't hold it in any longer. And I remember one Sunday, I was sitting in a pew, and I couldn't think straight. the entire sermon because he was hitting on everything. Everything. Pastor Aaron was hitting on everything that I needed to hear that Sunday. And I was at my wit's end. I almost felt like I was clean broken half spiritually. I felt like I was just broken mentally. I just felt completely broken altogether. And I remember after that sermon, and I was like, please don't do it, Aaron, please. And he did an altar call. Of course he would do an altar call. And I remember sitting in my pew, and after a little bit, I didn't go. I didn't go. And then the longer I sat there, the more I could feel tears starting to come up in my eyes. And then the more I got up, and then I went up to the front of the church, and I remember I just started crying over the altar. And Aaron came over. I won't forget what he told me. Because he said, I know you've been struggling for a while. I could see it. He's like, are you done running? Oh, he knew the entire time that I was running because he told me before I ran, guys, he saw some of my calling and he knew, and he told me not to run. And what did I do? I ran anyway. And Aaron looked at me and he's like, I've already been there and I've done that. So, are you done running? And that's when I told him that my running shoes were wore out. I couldn't run another step. I was done. So that's when I fully began to give in to what God wanted me to do. And that's when these stories kept continuing on Sunday. And that's when I felt a deeper calling to broadcast these out a little farther rather than just telling the stories every Sunday. I still tell the stories every Sunday, but I had a deeper calling to branch out even farther, which is why I've started these podcasts. These podcasts is a great way to branch out with these stories because you can get them on all kinds of social media websites, YouTube, Podbean, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, all kinds of places that people can reach them in any kind of way. And it's selfish of me to think that I need to hoard all of these stories to myself and not let anyone else hear them because of fear of judgment or of letting people down. I mean, that's kind of a selfish thought on my part because this is a gift of God, not anyone else. I'm not making these podcasts for anybody. This is just God. This is Him using me in every way. Letting Him use me in every way. So, these podcasts started 6 years ago. Not the podcast, sorry. The stories. The stories started 6 years ago. The podcast started last November. So there's a lot of stories that I've told that have not been recorded on podcasts. I'd have to say I've told probably in the 100 range of stories, because there's 4 Sundays each month. 4 each month. I've told quite a few stories, and I'm hoping that these stories have touched people in different ways, and I'm even hoping this podcast touches people in different ways, because this was a rough one, guys, and I'm sorry if I got so emotional, but it's just painful to go back to those times where you felt like you were in despair and you were hopeless, because the devil won't ride you as hard if he has you right where he wants you. If you're right where he wants you, broken, and not knowing what to do, and just choosing to run, that's exactly where he has you, and that's exactly where he wants you to stay. So I knew that entire time, when I was feeling in despair and I was feeling horrible, I felt like God had turned his back on me. But how selfish of a thought was that? I turned my back on him. I ran the other way. When he was trying to help me go the right way, I ran the opposite way. I turned my back on him, and I didn't want to face those consequences. But I've faced them now, and I've become better over time with these stories. And I think that time, as much as I'd hate saying it, I think that time of running has really shown me different things that I needed to know in my journey. If I didn't have that time of that low part in my Christian walk, or that low part in my faith, I don't think I could be as relatable to you guys as what I am today. This podcast was a little rough for me, and I was putting it off and putting it off and putting it off because I didn't want to do it. But here I was again. God was talking to me, and he's like, putting it on my heart. He's like, you need to do it. Because I guess there's some people out there that need to hear it. I wanted to do this podcast clear at the beginning on, like, the podcast number 1 is this one that I wanted to do. But he told me no. He told me to wait. And I'm so glad I did wait, because I'm so much better now than when I was, spiritually. I'm still not 100% where I think he wants me to be, and I'm not for sure fully where that is, where he wants me to go, or what he wants me to do. But, I think I'm on the right track. I think I'm on the right track, guys. Now, here's a funny thing that I found when I was going through my drawers and trying to rearrange things with this podcast, trying to find little tidbits of information for this podcast. It's titled, My Little Stories, because I wrote this years ago, when I was telling stories at church, and I was trying to get my words out on how it started. This is a different, outlook on how it started, but this is before I knew I was going to do podcasts, way before. I thought I was just going to keep telling stories in church, and that's as far as my calling will go. But God's pushing me farther and pushing me deeper. But this is before podcast days, okay? It says, every Sunday I tend to tell a short story about what has happened to me this past week, or every week. Every story I tell is 100% true, which it is. I don't make any of this up. These stories are what happens to me personally, or what I have witnessed happen to someone else. I use these stories to help relate to God's mercy, love, attention, kindness, and so much more. I started telling these stories shortly after I finished taking a college speech course. I thought to myself, I don't want to lose the ability to speak in front of people. If I don't use it, then I'll lose it. So that's when something compelled me one Sunday to tell a story. I think how it turned into telling a story every week was because the first time I spoke, it was more specifically for a testimony. It just built from that moment on. So now my church family will ask me, what kind of story will you tell next week? Do you have a story for next week? Yet. I didn't realize the impact I was making on these individuals until they started to tell me how much they love my stories every week. God gives each individual a gift. We may not want the gift, me, but God intends for us to use the gift he's given us. Back when I was in high school, I would have never pictured myself doing what I am doing now. I went out of my way to never, ever have to speak in front of a crowd of people. Something has changed. Slowly over time, God was preparing me for this journey. I never realized he was preparing me for something so out of my comfort zone. I was shy to the point of never wanting to speak in front of others. God has intentionally put me through situations and has inserted certain people into my life for a reason. All of this was building up to me being able to publicly speak and to tell my little stories every Sunday. God knew that this was out of my comfort zone. He also knew the glorious outcome of pushing me past my limits. None of this would have been possible without God. My little tidbit of information is this. Don't walk through this life with such a closed and narrow mind that you don't see the gifts that God has in store for you. Look at situations and everyday tasks as a lesson. What can I learn from God in this situation? You can learn something about him every day. Just stay open to the possibilities. That was written by me in 2016. It still resounds today, and is still very truthful even today, even back in 2016. My advice for all of you today, I'm going to read a couple verses, but before I get to that, my advice for you today is to don't run. Please don't run. It'll save you a lot of time. It'll save you so much time if you don't run. He's there to try to guide you in whatever calling, talent, or gift you have. And just because he gives you this gift or this calling, and you're like, I don't want to do this, I don't want this, You need to be open to the possibilities, because he's molded me and shaped me into a whole different person than what I was in high school. If you would have met me in high school or met me in junior high, you would have never fathomed that I would have done this. I vowed to myself in high school that I would never do anything like this. Well, that's funny, because look at me now. But, it's been a great journey so far, and I can't thank you all enough for listening to these podcasts and keep me going and keep me motivated. You guys are seriously the best. But, don't run. Listen to whatever he's putting on your heart, and if he keeps putting something on your heart, it must be kind of important. So listen to it, be open to it, and go with it. I mean, just listen to his calling on whatever he wants you to do, and don't run. Talk to people if you're feeling feelings or emotions that you don't understand. Talk to many people, because sometimes just one person won't have all the answers you need. Talk to many different people. There's many different outlooks on this life, okay? Alright, we're going to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 4 through 7, and we're talking about calling and gifts and talents, okay? It says, there are different kinds of gifts. Oh, I'm reading out of the NIV. There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in everyone is the same God at work. Now to each one the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. So this is pretty much saying that there are different gifts, there are different callings, there are different talents, but it's all given by the same God. The same wonderful, beautifully made God that created you and me. He gave us all these gifts, and just because they're different doesn't mean that one's better than the other. We need all gifts and all talents to be able to make everything function properly and work. Okay? So just because you think you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, my gift isn't that good. Like, why should I keep listening to this? And I'll stop right there. We're done. It's okay to be feeling all these different feelings. You have valid reasons why you're feeling these emotions. I had valid reasons as to why I felt like I couldn't do this anyway. I wanted anything, any other kind of gift with this. But he said, no, this is your only gift. And I think that's what he's going to do with all of us. He gives us all individual, unique, special gifts. And we need to use them. Use them for him. No matter how small you think it is, it can make a big difference, okay? Hebrews 13, verse 21. It says, equip you with everything good for doing his will, and may he work in us what is pleasing to him through Jesus Christ, to whom be the glory forever and ever. Amen. I love that Bible verse, and I specifically looked for this Bible verse because I knew it was in here. It's talking about how he has already equipped you for this job. He will equip you. He will mold you into what you need to be mentally, in a mindset, spiritually in a mindset, and a just ready in any kind of way, spiritually, physically, mentally. He will equip you. I'm going to read the commentary a little bit because I like the commentary also. It says, this verse includes two significant results of Christ's death and resurrection. God works in us to make us the kind of people that would please him, and he equips us to do the kind of work that would please him. Let God change you from within and then use you to help others. So you have to let that change happen. You feel like you're comfortable right here, right where you're at. You feel like you're comfortable right here being stagnant, right where you are. I'm perfectly fine right here. But there's always room for improvement, and there's always room to change and to grow in every way that he wants you to be. So always be open to him. Always be open to the changes. Always be open to the growth. Don't run. Don't run like I did. Don't look the other way and wish that you had a different gift or a different calling, because this is it. This is what he's giving you. This is the gift. This is the calling that he's giving you. And if you're thinking in the back of your brain right now about your gift or your calling, and you feel that tug at your heart and you feel that tug at your spiritual walk, follow it. Follow him every step of the way, because he won't lead you astray. He won't lead you the wrong way. He just wants to build you up and put you in circumstances that's going to make you stronger for whatever calling he's going to put you in. Okay? I can't thank you all enough, if you're still listening, to be listening through this podcast and to be taking on the emotional roller coaster that was this podcast. I thank you so much for still being here from podcast 1 all the way to this podcast. And I thank you for your support. Your support is unwavering, and number one, I gotta thank God for being able to get me through everything He did, to be able to put me back on the right path, the right journey of where I need to be. Be sure to check out my podcasts on YouTube, Podbean, Apple Podcasts. I'm on 3 different social media platforms. I'm on Facebook. Check me out on Facebook. All these are under Lifeline Podcasts. Thanks again, guys, for everything, for listening, and for being on this crazy journey with me that started 6 years ago. It's been awesome, and I can't wait to see where God continues to take me. And I can't wait to see where God takes all of you. Okay? Thank you so much, you guys. You guys have an awesome week, and have a good one, okay? Be sure to be looking out for those gifts, talents, and callings that He's giving you, and don't ignore them. They're there for a reason. Okay, guys, have a great week. Bye.